What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I'm going to dive into the news of the day that came out on Twitter regarding the New York Giants with Nate Solder. Now, nothing is definitive yet, but it's starting to look more and more likely that Nate Solder will be back. Of course, there were reports about a week ago that this could be the case, that the New York Giants were looking to potentially restructure with Solder. And, you know, as we've had information leak about the New York Giants, it's seemingly become truth. You heard things leak about Leonard Williams. We ended up franchise tagging Leonard Williams. You heard things leak about obviously Kevin Zeitler. Well, we ended up cutting Kevin Zeitler. Well, now it looks like it's very probable that Solder will be back with the New York Giants. The question will be, what will the contract be? And I'll talk more about it after we pull up the quote as to what I would be looking for as a New York Giant fan and why this could make some sense. In addition to that, I also wanted to touch on some of the rumors that came out yesterday about two-year pro N'Keal Harry, formerly of Arizona State, coming out from Mike Garofalo, talking about the possibility, potentially, of the New York Giants trading to acquire him. He basically said that a lot of teams have been contacting the New England Patriots, and it would only make sense that the New York Giants could potentially be a natural fit for a few reasons. One, well, of course, Joe Judge used to be the wide receivers coach for the New England Patriots when Harry was there. And of course, he coached with the Patriots. So, and we need a wide receiver, not to mention he's tall, something the Giants definitely could use at 6'4". The question would be, what would the price be, and would he be worth it? But when you see some of the quotes that Joe Judge said that I think I got from Big Blue View, I want to make sure I give them a quick shout out of what he had to say about N'Keal Harry in his rookie year when he was coaching him, it would make you think that Joe Judge likes the prospect. And he does fit a need of ours. So if there are teams that are asking about N'Keal Harry from the New England Patriots, you would think the New York Giants could potentially be one of them. But I wanted to pull up the quote from Duggan about Nate Solder. There is optimism that the offensive lineman Nate Solder will return to play for the Giants per source. Sides are still working on the terms. Solder was due to have a $16.5 million dead cap hit. $16 million hit, in 2021. And, of course, if we were going to cut Solder, it would have been 10.5, and I think it would have been 6.5 after June 1st, which then, like I've said in previous videos, that $4 million would go against next year's cap. So, regardless, we are responsible for $10.5 million. Now, what are some of the things that you have to worry about? Before we even get into the contract specifics, what are some of the things that you have to worry about if you're a New York Giants fan? Well, the obvious, the guy hasn't played in a year. The second most obvious thing to me is you would assume if he's going to start, which he may very well not, based off some of the things you heard about Dave Gettleman and what he had to say about Matt Barrett, but if he was going to start, it would be on the right side. I can't imagine the Giants looking to shift Andrew Thomas for Nate Solder in his second year after he played exclusively on the left side last year. Solder hasn't played on the right side, I believe, since his rookie year with the New England Patriots. Not to mention, you worry about whether or not he could be in football shape. Yeah, you could work out, you could do things like that. That doesn't mean that you'll be ready to go. Now, I would assume before the New York Giants restructure Solder, they'd be confident that the veteran would be in football shape. Now, some of the reasons why the Giants could look to bring him back outside of course, the financial aspect, Judge may view him as a guy with better coaching that he could get something out of. Of course, has New England roots, knows Nate Solder, so maybe that has something to do with it. But outside, and I think he could obviously serve as a good leader. This guy was a team captain just a year ago when he was playing with the New York Giants, and he's obviously a guy that the New York Giants respect tremendously. The only issue that fans have with him is his contract. He hasn't lived up to it. He hasn't been worth it. I go back to 2018. The second half, he was really good. First half, he was horrible. 2019, he was abysmal. And there are more factors than just him. Obviously, the line as a whole, a rookie quarterback, I always go back to that. But definitely has not lived up to the contract. Now, why could restructuring the contract make some sense? Well, it's kind of like what I talked about in my other video. Say you're able to get him down to $10 million. You're going to take a $10.5 million hit this year anyway. So if you're able to get him down to 10, you're not taking any loss. Now, the only way you'd be able to do this, I would imagine you'd have to restructure the salary and give him a year next year, even though he's under contract next year anyway. He'd have to take a substantial pay cut. And if he was willing to do that, and it wouldn't cost you much to get rid of him next year or the year after that, I'm okay with it if it's the same amount of savings that you would have gotten from cutting him to begin with. So that, I think, is where the New York Giants look at it. And in a way, you could argue that the Giants would actually be saving money. Even if he came back for $10.5 million, which would have been the dead cap hit, more so than what if they would have just cut him, because you would have to find a replacement, a swing tackle, whether it be bringing back a guy like Cam Fleming. That is the role that Nate Solder would have. So in a way, it's almost like you're gaining $5 or $6 million on this year's cap if you're able to structure it in, down to the 10.5 that you would have to pay to cut him anyway. So that is why I do see where it could make sense. And obviously the fact that he's a team leader. Will it happen? We're going to have to wait and see. And for me to fully analyze this decision, I have to see what the contract is. And what I saw a lot of people on Twitter saying, and I'm sure what a lot of New York Giants fans are thinking, is why didn't you do this for Kevin Zeitler? Well, it's easier said than done. We don't know that Kevin Zeitler wanted to restructure his contract. Nate Solder may have gone to the Giants and said, listen, I really want to play for you guys. I'm willing to do what it takes. Let's get something done. We don't know if that's the case with Kevin Zeitler. I would imagine if Zeitler was willing to take a substantial pay cut, the Giants would have tried to bring him back. And you're seeing cuts all around the league. Before fans start to go crazy, you look at the Chiefs today. They lost their 2 starting tackles from last year due to cuts. So it is what it is. It's the life of the NFL right now. I still think, even if Solder is back, the New York Giants will use that money to potentially bring in that guard. And like I said, rather now than having to spend $5 or $6 million on a swing tackle, if you're able to get Solder down, maybe you can use that $5 or $6 million to find Zeitler's replacement for this year. So for this year, in a way, if it's structured a certain way, it could actually save the New York Giants money. So that's my thought process on that. And if it does, I'm not against the move. Will he be starting based off of what Gettleman said? Maybe. Maybe not, but he could definitely at least serve as a swing tackle if Peart struggles or if either Thomas or Peart goes down with an injury. So I see nothing wrong with this if it's for the right amount of money, and as long as he doesn't have a definitive starting role. He's got to earn that. He's going to come back in good shape, and obviously you don't want to touch Andrew Thomas on that left side. The other thing I wanted to touch on was N'Keal Harry. This coming out yesterday from Mike Garofalo, and I thought it was an interesting rumor because when I first read it, the first team I thought of, because of the reasons I've already stated, is the New York Giants. The Giants need a tall receiver. Joe Judge has coached this guy. He's coming over from New England. What would the price be? That's the question. Am I willing to give up a 4th or 5th round pick? I'd entertain it. I remember when Harry came into the league, he was a wide receiver I actually liked a lot when I was doing mock drafts. I think I had a mock going in the first round to the Packers, the Ravens. He ultimately ended up going to the New England Patriots, and they thought they were getting a primetime wide receiver. Well, his stats, which we're going to go over in a minute, have been underwhelming, which is why the Patriots may be looking to move on. He's obviously still very young. The other thing is he doesn't make a whole lot of money. I think it's $2 million, whatever it may be, and the Giants may look at it like if they're able to get him via trade, it would fill in a need. I'm not telling you that he'd be our number one, not by any stretch of the imagination, but if you're able to get a guy like Harry and then draft a guy like Waddle, it would fill out your wide receiving core. Even if he was a number 4, you're still only paying him $2 million a year for the next 2 years. So it could make sense for the New York Giants, and you'd have the ability on the 5th-year rookie option, being that he was a first-round pick. But this came out from Mike Garofalo. The NFL Network's Mike Garofalo reported Wednesday on NFL Now that teams have been calling the Patriots to see if they're willing to part with Harry. Harry is an interesting guy to watch here as we get into the start of the league year, maybe a little bit further as we get closer to the draft, because there's going to be a lot of moving parts in New England. Of course, New England made a trade yesterday to bring back their tackle that they let go a couple of years ago, particularly this year, Garofalo said. Then I wanted to pull up the numbers for N'Keal Harry and kind of talk about how underwhelming he's been. His first year, he only played in 7 games. He started 5. He only had 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. He did suffer an injury, which Judge later goes on to talk about in the quote I'm going to pull up. Last year, in 9 starts, he played in 14 games. He still only had 309 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he really hasn't gotten the job done. But you go back, you look at his tape, you look at his highlights at Arizona State. The guy was a very impressive prospect. And as you see there, he's only going to be 24 years old next year, and he'll be under a very cost-effective salary. So for the right deal, if Judge likes him, I think it could make sense. And this, what I got from BigBlueView.com, is what Judge had to say about Harry in his rookie year while he was coaching with the New England Patriots. He missed a lot of ball early on, Judge said. He had the IR situation. You can only do so much when you're working to get back off an injury. He did a good job as far as getting his body healthy, and he came back. You don't just jump in. It's not fantasy football, which we're used to Judge saying. We heard it just a couple of days ago, where you take players, plug them in, and all of a sudden everyone starts collecting points. It takes a lot of rhythm and find some confidence in the offense, but he's done a good job. I've been pleased, Judge says. That's definitely shown. It's something we saw when he was in college, a strength that we like about him. He plays with a good aggressiveness. He plays to his size, which is key. you can't have a big guy try to play small, and he's played up to how big he is right now. So that was Judge displaying confidence in him 2 years ago when he was with the New England Patriots. But obviously, you would think Judge would still like him, being, the nice things he talked about him there, what they liked in him coming out of college. Obviously, they took him in the first round. They saw something, and from what Judge said, you would think he was at least involved in the draft process for the New England Patriots. So it's an interesting name to keep an eye out on that Mike Garoppolo talked about. Do I think, like I said, he solves our wide receiver one problem? No. Is he as sexy of a name as Kenny Golladay? No, and we could still get Kenny Golladay. I'm not going to rule it out. Do I think we're going to? Probably ultimately not, but N'Keal Harry could be a name that would come in for a very cheap price in terms of per year basis. That could make sense for the New York Giants and could at least fill some depth on this roster at that position. We all know we need a tall wide receiver. Slayton's really our tallest wide receiver in terms of an impact player. He's 6'1", maybe 6'2". Harry would come in at 6'4", instantly help you with the jump ball, and maybe you get a speedy wide receiver in the first round if this were to play out. As far as Solder goes, like I said, if the restructure is at the right price and it's not committing you long-term for Nate Solder, could make sense. He's a leader. He's a guy that has experience both on the right and the left side, even though he hasn't played on the right side since his rookie year. The question you have to have is he in football shape? But if he is, and the Giants feel like he could at least provide as a swing tackle for this football team under the right circumstances, I do believe a restructure could make sense. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.